Good morning, everyone, and welcome to EduTech 2020 Tech for Education, Transforming Education Digital. I would like to welcome our guest speaker for the inaugural address, Dr. Mohandas Pai, Chairman, Aarin Capital and Manipal Global Education. Dr. Pai needs no introduction. He's a Padma Shri awardee and a former CFO and board member at Infosys. He's also the co-founder of Akshay Patra, the world's largest midday meal program, and works actively with the government and regulators on policy recommendations and guidelines. Welcome, sir. And now I would like to welcome our moderator for the fireside chat to follow the inaugural address, Mr. Vinesh Menon, CEO, Education, Consulting and Skilling Services, Ampersand Group. Mr. Menon is a seasoned professional with more than 25 years of value delivery to diverse industries. In establishing 14 K-12 schools from scratch, Mr. Menon got hands-on experience in almost all areas that define the ecosystem and included learning spaces design, academics, technology and innovation, content development and delivery, teacher recruitment, training, student enrollment, and marketing. I would now request Dr. Pai to give his inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Folks, thank you very much for inviting me. The pandemic was an unbelievable event which did not happen in the last 100 years. For a simple reason, it impacted a larger part of the globe than any event, including the First World War and the Second World War. It was also very sudden. Economies just fell off a cliff because everything shut down. And the whole idea of the pandemic remedy was to make sure that there are social distancing, and it meant that people had to be far away from each other to stop this kind of a spread of this pandemic. It also meant that people had to depend on technology for most of the things that they do in their day-to-day life. Suddenly we saw a great assimilation of technology to get supplies, to talk to your doctors, to get entertainment, for education, and for banking and everything else. And in education, we saw a sudden shift to the digital world for a very large section of the population globally. Yes, there is a digital divide, there are challenges, but we saw a fair section of school children getting up in the morning, putting on the uniform, going to the next room, opening the laptop, and attending class. And at 4 o'clock, they shut the laptop, go to the room, change the dress, and go and play. And it just happened as if there was nothing else. It just normal, even though there was a pandemic, a sudden event. And we saw this massive shift in school education. We saw this massive shift in college education. And in college education, maybe 50 to 60%, much larger than schools, were already online because a very large number of the college education was already being conducted through flipped classrooms and using technology. And very many people had laptops, so it is much easier. All regulators in India too said that 20 to 40% of course content would be digital in future. So this pandemic has brought about a massive shift in the use of digital technologies in education, which is very hard to change. We must remember that education changes very slowly because there's a very large system, and to change the mindset of faculty, teachers, and schools is going to be very difficult. But it happened all of a sudden, and when the pandemic subsides, we are going to see a massive shift to digital education. Now, what do you mean by digital education? Let's understand what is education. Education is a process for young children to grow up, to be ready to grow up to be young adults. And when you're a young adult, you go to college and you spend 3 to 4 years going through a course. The formative years of a child's life are very important. And that's why you have play schools, you have classrooms and teaching, you have teachers, etc., you have play, etc. Because research proves that up to the age of 8, your mind is your brains are very plastic, and you absorb everything that you see around you, and you learn the most by the time you're 12, 13. That's why young children grow up using language. Now, we suddenly saw the rise of edtech companies. There were edtech companies, Una Academy, Baiju, and Vedantu were there. And suddenly we saw a rise of these companies in this country. And this rise is going to continue for more time. Now, we had the new education policy. And the new education policy was a very different policy, because for the first time, well, the last one was 34 years ago, so you can't blame them. For the first time, they had an entire chapter in the section 23 on technologies, spoke about the use of AI, spoke about the use of boards, spoke about the use of apps, said there should be coding for young children from the age of 6 onwards, the use of web-based technology, and the creation of a national technology center for school education and college education to create content to support teachers and faculty to change the curriculum, etc. So the recognition that technology is going to be a game changer is already there in the new education policy. And the new education policy also says that for special education, for disadvantaged kids or special children, you need to have the use of technology in a very, very big way. It also says that for teachers' education, we have to use technology and the content has to come through technology. It just means that regulators who govern the school and college education system have recognized the use of technology and the impact of technology on everybody else. And this is going to continue. They also said they want to see a time when every home in India has a digital device and is connected by Wi Fi or broadband to the internet so that they can receive all the content digitally. Now, this very large vision has to be put in place. And I think it's going to be put in place because we have very big telcos like Jio and Airtel, which are giving you broadband and Wi Fi at very, very low rates. In fact, you'll be surprised that content absorption in India is about 17 GB per month for Airtel and 14 GB per month for Jio, all across their mass consumers. So this is the new reality now. Now, in this new reality, how should one look at the edtech business and how should one look at digital education? Let's look at data. There are 265 children in our schools. India produces 25 million babies a year. We've been having 2.5 crore babies a year for the last 30 years. Fertility in the whole of South India has come down from 2.1, which is replacement, to 1.7. And the whole of India fertility this year will be about 2.0. So population is not a problem. And it means that people are going to invest more in the children. There is going to be greater focus on education, and the market for education services is going to expand. Out of these 265 million children, or 26.5 crore children, up to class 8, almost every kid is in school. There is a dropout because today, if 100 children enter class 1, about 80 complete class 10. Out of them, about 80% pass the 10th standard examination, and then 56 go to class 11 and 12, and in 12 out of 56, again some 80% pass, and about 26 go to school. So if you take the young children in class 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, at an average of 20 million children, that'll be about, in 5 of these classes, that'll be about 100 million young children. Out of 100 million young children, we can safely say about 55% are going to private schools. And today in this country, people who are relatively well off, people who can afford it, send their children to private schools. Yes, many people with good economic condition also send their children to government school in many states where there are no private schools. But the preference for private schools is very, very high in this country. And Center Square Foundation has sent the data. Now, if you look at these 100 million children, it means that about 55 million go to private schools. And out of the 55 million, I would reckon something like 25, 30 million is addressable market for edtech for all companies, because edtech for children is expensive. Even if it's a B2B model or a B2C model, is very expensive compared to what they spend. You'll be surprised that in private schools, about 75% of students spend less than 1,000 rupees a month. 1,000 rupees a month. And about 50% spend around 500 rupees a month for the 55% of young children who go to private school all across India. So the 25 to 30 million young children in schools is a good market for edtech. And edtech, in my view, will be successful if it is only B2C. There are many companies which have gone B2B, and B2B is very difficult because you have to train the teachers, you have to be in touch, and there's a very heavy maintenance, and teaching older people the use of technology is a bit difficult. And also the number of schools and catering to every one of them, managing schools is a difficult thing, and they don't pay you very well. They will always negotiate you down and they'll ask for a cut so that what you get is going to be very little. So there is B2B, but the most successful companies have been B2C. We have seen Baiju say that they're getting about 25, 30, or 40 million more people coming on because it's free, 4.5 million subscribers. Vedantu and Una Academy and others are taken off and they're getting a lot of money. We may have 4 to 5 unicorns in this space. In the college space, there are about maybe 3.7 crore young people in college. That is about 37 million. The gross enrollment rate is 26.5, with Bihar at 13 and Tamil Nadu at 49. So in Tamil Nadu, 49% of young people in the age group of 18 to 23 go to college. Now, when you look at the college side, there are many challenges because the college teaching is across social sciences, across the STEM subjects, across engineering, across medicine, management, etc. There are a variety of courses, and out of these 3.7 crore people, maybe 60% have a laptop, and maybe 50% of 3.7 can afford to have digital education. And the colleges are largely in the private sector. About 65% of colleges in this country are run by the private sector. And in the private sector, there's a greater use of technology in the form of giving them content through flipped classrooms, giving them content which can be put in the laptop, having simulation in the labs, and using it for enterprises or enterprise software for running the colleges, for doing assessment, etc. So the market there is very different, a bit fragmented, and that will be a very different story as we go along. There are many companies coming too. I just looked at data from Inc. 42 from Delhi, and they say there are 4,450 edtech companies in this country. And I would reckon maybe 100, 150 are the major ones who are trying to do well, because earning revenues in this market is a difficult thing because the marketing costs are very, very high. There's a lot of content floating around, a lot of technology floating around, etc. So we are going to see the rise in the use of technology in future. Education is going to transform and is irreversible in future. And the policymakers in this country have recognized that and put it into the new education policy as we go along. So in future, my view is that digital technology is going to be the game changer in education, both at the schools and high levels. You're not going to do away with physical classes. You're not going to do away with physical schools. You're not going to do away with physical colleges. But the cost of education will come down, and there'll be many more people. One other issue which we'll see rising is the use of digital education for training and for lifelong education. The new education policy recognizes the need for lifelong education and says you must use technology there. And there'll be a greater use of technology, especially in management and in other courses. And we are seeing that happen all around the world, especially in the US too. People now are having college education remotely. They may go to a hostel, but they'll have it in the room. Classes are not being held because of the fear of the infection in the pandemic. And this will irrevocably change the way that education is delivered all across, even in colleges, even in the best universities, etc. This will have repercussions because the high cost of education in the West is going to be broken. So if you want to look at this area of services, you must make sure that you deconstruct the entire education chain. By deconstructing, finding out where value can be added and where the digital intervention is best, you will be able to find a sweet spot where you can do business. And I must say that India is very advanced in this compared to most of the countries. I think the number of edtech companies in school education is very large and they're very sophisticated. I've seen the market in the US. It is not as sophisticated as in India. Even in the college education side, we are finding a lot more happening in India. China is, of course, very, very ahead. But, we are more sophisticated than China, because in China, too, because of the increase in income, digital education is going on. Japan is way behind. They have not been able to transform the country into a digital nation. And in Europe, it is very indifferent in many, many parts, even though they have greater access, greater money, etc. So if you look at the future, by 2025, I would imagine a very large market for school education, very large market for college education, and the greater use of technology, offline, online education, greater use of technology for lifelong learning, for professional education, and for greater use of technology for training. But the key thing is, how do you choose your revenue model? How do you choose a place to be? And what value do you add in a very, very competitive, in a very hyper growth, in a very expensive marketplace. So I'll stop here and tell you that I enjoy talking to you and hand over to Vinesh.
Thank you, Dr. Pai. I think that was fantastic. I mean, the data that you threw really showed exactly where we stand as a country and the progress that we're making. I must just say it's an honor, privilege to really have this conversation with you. Ideally, I would have liked to talk to you so much that the whole day goes by, but unfortunately, we have a little time constraint. And given the theme of the event, I'll try and restrict it to a few questions that I really want to pick your mind on. Uh, Dr. Pai, you mentioned, and yeah, we both you just mentioned there are two real game changers that have happened, right? Sequentially, the COVID has struck us, and then the new education policy has come in, and both these game changers have made everyone look at technology with a different lens. Today, almost everybody talks about technology, and really the walking of the talk has started to happen at a much brisker pace. Having said that, and going by some of the data that you just mentioned, uh, the digital divide that seems to be there in India today. I'm just trying to understand, is this going to get worsened? Are we going to have a further division of the digital divide, especially when you mentioned that 25 million is the addressable market of edtech? Or is there a unity that's starting to happen digitally within the country? Now, the reason I'm saying this is on one side, you see a lot of parents talking about how digital revolution is also making them worried that children's physical activity is going to go down. This we see in the urban side of the country. At the same time, there are also news about how children in the remote parts of the country have not been able to get into online education because of no access to devices. So there is this massive dichotomy happening here. Do you think this is going to, improve over time?
Well, let me say this: we are a poor country. Our per capita income is just $2,000. We are $2.93 trillion in GDP, but we are a poor country because in per capita we are quite low. So we must understand there are 900 million people living on less than $2 a day. All right, they're just above the poverty line. So now we are a democracy. We had Digital India driven by the Prime Minister 5 years ago, which has been remarkable, and it has solved many of the challenges that we have in terms of reaching people, giving them DBT, giving them health, giving them everything else. So my view is there is a digital divide. The government recognizes very well, and in many states they're trying to beat it down by preventing school education through digital technologies. Even in the state of Karnataka, they're saying, oh, we don't need it, we should not do it, because why? Oh, rural children cannot do it. How can we have the digital divide? But it doesn't go away because the parents who can afford it want this digital education for the children, and the B2C model is working perfectly fine. So I think in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a massive investment in digital education, where I think that every child in school from class 6 onwards will be given a tablet with rich multimedia content. And that market is going to go open up, driven by parents, driven by our democratic traditions and the need of the government. And the new education policy recognizes that. And as far as college is concerned, I think every young person in college will have a laptop. In many states like Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, government gives laptop for certain sections of students. And I think the quantum of laptops that are there will pass on. And I think the IT industry too should start a trend where the laptop that they discard after 2 or 3 years, when they go on to something new, they give it to school children in a very big way. The desktop is now gone. I don't think people use desktops anymore. I don't know. Vinesh, you must tell me. But I think we started with NASCOM a massive drive, because remember there are 5 million employees working in technology. That is 50 lakhs. And if 20 lakhs change every year, I mean, the 20 lakh laptops can be given, and I think it will happen. And I do see, because advent of technologies, tablet costs, everything will come down. But I'm very confident that government will come with a big boom. For example, if a tablet with preloaded software costs 10,000 rupees, it's possible. Not that old silly tablet that one minister tried to bring 5 6 years ago. It's ridiculous. Now, you were able to do that for 10 million, 1 crore. That is only 50,000 crores. Government spends 6
Yeah.
lakh crores on education all over the country every year. So I think it'll take time. By 2025, I think it'll be largely bridged.
Wonderful. That's very heartening to know. Just moving on, I remember hearing you in one of your earlier talks on the NEP, and one point, or rather one area that you really emphasized on, was two big reforms that you particularly liked. One was the National Research Foundation that's got set up, or being planned to get set up, and secondly is this whole multidisciplinary subjects that students could enjoy in universities and colleges. Now, you have yourself mentioned about the quality of output that really needs to improve. among our 900 universities and 51,000 odd colleges. And you also, you just mentioned some time back as to how India is relatively far better than many other countries as far as the digital revolution is concerned. But the number of PhDs in computer science in that area is just about 500 of the 45,000 are coming out. So, just go a little deeper into that. So how do the whole NRF, is it going to make and the second part, I love the way you mentioned about credit bank, how a student can now start getting credits from various different universities and go back to his primary universities and get a degree. So nuclear physics with music, with cricket, can really be now packaged in. You talked about this, just wanted to go a little deeper and get you to share your thoughts on this.
There are three facets of education that you must keep in mind. Access. Every young person should have access to education. School, up to 12, every kid should go to school. Whether public or private, we should go and we should make sure. And every young person should have an ability to go to college. Second, equity. There are poor people, there are disadvantaged people. Government must give them scholarships, and that is there. And the third is quality. In terms of access, we have nearly solved the problem. We have a huge school education apparatus. Yes, there are some gaps, which I think will solve. In college, there are a large number of students and is expanding. That will solve. But in terms of quality, we are way behind. Why are we way behind? Because quality comes when there is greater research. And research comes when there is greater funding. The whole university system spends only 5,700 crores on research. It's peanuts, largely funded by government. And you cannot charge student fees to do research. Research cannot be done through fees. And that is why this National Research Foundation is a game changer. Because if you look at the norms, it will be on a quantity basis, no discrimination between public and private sector. It will be run well. And if, let us say, 5, 7, 10,000 crores more comes into the system, that will be a game changer. And like you said, only 500 IT PhDs. We need to produce 5,000. Because today the problem is the bottom has been taken care of, the middle has been taken care of, the top in terms of high quality PhDs has to be done. We need more high quality PhDs. So I think this is a very big game changer. Hopefully it will take a few years to happen or lesser years to happen. And the second big drawback in education is the lack of flexibility. Now, every young person going to college is stuck in a particular mold. He has to take a course where the curriculum is fixed. He can't take subjects of his choice. It's not available. You go to engineering college, you want IT, you can't do IT. So you do civil engineering, then you go to IT. I mean, it's crazy. So now they change the system to say all universities be multidisciplinary because the policymakers recognize that, creativity and innovation comes not when you're narrowly focused, when you're exposed to the arts, to the social sciences, to human emotion, to understanding people and how society works. Because I think the greatest thinkers and philosophers were not from the sciences, right? Because in sciences, logic is very, very strong. You want to see some certainty and logic, whereas the social sciences is very amorphous. You have to debate, you have to ideate, you have to think, you have to come out with new solutions. So they can have multidisciplinary. That means you can take courses across a wide choice. You can take courses with different universities and take credits. You can go overseas, do a semester and come back. And universities can tie up with each other so that each other gives a course because no university will have all those courses. And you have a credit bank where you can go take some courses, put it in the bank, take 2 years off, etc. And you can do educational period of time. You do a 4-year course in 1 year, you get a certificate, 2 years diploma, 3 years degree, 4 years honor certificate. So you can opt in and opt out. You can do something in one school, one college, go to another college. Now, this kind of a design and architecture has been done in the policy. Will it work? Yes, it will start beginning to work because we're seeing the top 100, 200 universities tie up with foreign universities. They want 100 foreign universities to come here, which is very good. I don't think they'll come, but there's an option for them to come. But most universities will tie up for online courses with the best universities and give content. And today, the explosion of content on the web, I think this problem is going to be very much less. You've seen Coursera, the largest number of students after the United States is from India. So I think the policy recognizes all this and gives the flexibility. So you have higher quality, you have the flexibility for universities and for students. And once it goes into play, I think it'll create a much more creative, much more happier, young people, happier graduates. Because all of us, though, when we go to college, we didn't like some subjects. We liked some subjects, but we couldn't study what we want because it is all fixed. And so many people are forced to do things because of parental pressure, etc. So I hope all that goes away.
Well, this is so heartening, and I'm sure parents and everybody who's listening to this would be very happy to hear this. Education 4.0 is a reality, and I think the whole hard coding getting diluted is fantastic. Sometime back you mentioned a very interesting point. You talked about how every child should ideally be having a tablet or a device in their hand with multimedia content, and they should start learning. There's also another thought which I picked up from one of your earlier talks, where you mentioned that a classroom or a physical classroom or a school is really meant for children to discover, debate, and discuss, and not really get loaded with knowledge and content by the teacher. Now, bring these two together. So far, we've always been hearing the words that a brick and mortar school is getting enabled with technology for children to learn and go forward. Do you see a point, or do you see a change happening here where the primary mode of learning and teaching would be technology and devices, and the brick and mortar school will now become an enabler or a support system to help all these other areas of discussing debates, interpersonal connections, sports, etc. I mean, do you see that shift happening where the school itself is not
I
going
see
to
the
be?
shift happening not to the extent that you are talking of, for a very simple reason. For young children, you need guidance. You can't hook a young child into technology and ask the child to learn, even though technology may be very easy to learn, because a child has to grow up as a human being, full of emotion, full of wonder. Because remember that for a child, education is a process of discovery, a process of curiosity, understanding things, a process of being curious, discovering. The challenge of discovery,
Yes.
the joy of discovery is very, very great. Yes, you can discover on a laptop, you can discover on a tablet, because you can get rich multimedia, videos, etc. And all children are hooked into that because they react to that in a very different manner, because there is so much of joy, so much of change. But too much of that may not be good, because the child gets secluded. The child has to work in environment, it has to work with other children. They must learn how to be together, they must learn how to fight and win, and how not to fight and not win, how to care for each other. All that emotion is very much required. So if you look at education, first of all, there is content in education, there's information, and then there is teaching where there's an explanation, and then there's an assessment where you go through an examination. I think a large part of the content can be given in a tablet where a child can learn on his own, and they come to class and explain and talk to the teacher and ask questions. Today in the classroom, everything is a one-way broadcast. So children get bored. Children want to do things in the classroom. They want to work with their hands. They want to talk. They want to ask questions. So if all this content is given beforehand, possibly the parents have to do a little bit more work, and they will be able to the child will be able to go through that, come to class and ask questions, and there can be discussion between all of them, and that will make a better person, in my personal view. And also, I think that even in college that is happening. For example, in the medical school in Antigua, we did a very unique thing. We said we'll have groups of 10 people, and they will discuss and they will learn. The tutor will go around and answer the queries. We found the learning outcome was much better than in a simple classroom. So we are constrained by the classroom, and the classroom is a result of the industrial revolution, one to many. Today with technology, we can deconstruct the whole thing, and we can give a lot of the content. A lot of the information can be given beforehand. Children and young people can learn that, come to classroom, answer the queries, discuss, debate, and that is much more interesting than a one-way broadcast. And also do continuous assessment, because there's no need for an examination end of the year. I mean, it's very silly that in a 3-hour examination, your whole life is decided. It's very silly, because in real life, you learn every single day. You don't go through one 3-year experience. So I think the assessment can be continuous, and that the greater use of technology can come. So the role of the teacher will slightly shift from 100% being a purveyor of information to maybe 30-40% being a tutor explaining, and maybe 30-40% being a content provider. And the rest is explaining to children and taking them to the paces. Yes, there'll be a dramatic change, but not to the extent where more and more will go online. I think it depends on the age. For example, in college, 40-50% can be online. In school,
Mm.
maybe 30-40% can be online, higher classes. In the lower classes, maybe 10-20%. Because the child has to learn through many other simulations rather than simulation only through a device.
And I think the whole platform will start reiterating what you've learned in the classroom better post the classroom, right? I think that's definitely going to happen.
And you should take away, of course, in the new education policy, there are going to be exams only in 10 and 11. The right to education has said you can't prevent a child going up, because the fear of failure should go away. I mean, I wrote a policy, helped write a policy for Karnataka, where we said in class 10, if you don't get the marks to pass, you just say completed, and go
Right.
to class 12 and say completed. Go through 12 years, because spend time in school, spend time among my young people. The social skills that you learn is extremely important for you. The education, the content that you learn, the information that you learn, you can pick up later. But the 12 years of being with people together, experiencing it, growing up, learning to live together, showing emotion, compassion, having energy, playing sport. That experience you can never get. And that is what is going to make you a very good human being as you go along. And that is what we want for society.
Now, Teresa, now something what you just mentioned. Now, imagine there are two children, and both these students want to get into the Ivy schools, and one of them really doesn't cut the marks that is required to get into Ivy school, but he's able to now start going online, MOOC courses, and start picking up everything that an Ivy school has to offer. And there's another one who's actually gone through the 95% or 98% cut and made it into Ivy schools. Eventually, when these two sit together, or they're in front of a job market, you think it's going to, with all that whole old traditional way of thinking that to get into Ivy schools, I need to pass and get so many marks. Is that going to go?
Vinesh, that's an interesting point. Vinesh, remember, I headed HR for Infosys, and we always said you got to be top 20% of class. Why did you do that? Because we had large number of applications. How do we sort it out? It is a gating criteria.
Yeah.
Right? It's a gating criteria. Now, what will we do? We will ask you for skills. For example, when you want a software engineer, you want him to do coding. Right?
Yeah.
You want a coding skills because they don't have the. Now we're going to say coding skills. Now, with all this coming up, I see a time when people are not going to look at this gating criteria, whether you've been to an IIT or you've been to a Harvard, etc. They will look at all other issues, see how you've been a problem solver. Have you been a problem solver? Have you done unique things? Do you have exposure? And based on that, call more people of the second category who didn't go to the Ivy school, but he went to many other courses, took all those courses because that shows curiosity, that shows self-confidence, willingness to work on your own, and call them for an interview and try it out. So I think that shift happening in a very massive way. In the West, universities are getting more and more apprehensive about the revenue model because they charge high fees. And they got a lot of faculty who hardly spend time teaching, right? And the faculty do a lot of things on their own. They're all becoming entrepreneurs in a very different way. It's all changing. They're not teaching as much. So I think that's going to change because they're not going to get those kind of fees. Because like you said, people deconstruct, do those courses and come. And today, we're going to see the rise of digital universities. Online course in how IIT Chennai, one in IIT Delhi, one in Triple IT, one in Institute of Science, and one in London School of Economics. Get it all together, get the credits, go to a digital university and give those credits, and they give you a degree and say you did all those courses and you got his degree. Now, when you look at the person, would you not hide? You'll at least call him for an interview because you'll be curious. Man, this is fantastic. How do you do that, right? This is what you want because you have done it across the spectrum, and this multi-sector exposure is what people want for creative people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Last question, and I'm just going to ask you this because Dr. Pai, you're one of, you're one of the top India's top angel investors, evangelists. You've really been a big encouragement for a lot of youngsters and startups. The new education policy, the way it's been designed, do you really think it's going to start slowly getting us to have more entrepreneurs and folks who are going to start doing things on their own going forward? And there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are listening to you, so it'll be interesting for them to hear this.
I think so because, once it gives you the flexibility, but, Vinesh, more than that, we have got role models today.
Yeah.
IT service industry, Nandan, Premji, Murthy, and, Kohli were the role models, right? Everybody wanted to do that. Now we got many more role models.
You're missing your own name.
Yeah, we got many more role models here who have been very successful, who are good technical people and who are leaders, and everybody wants to be like that. And also, a larger section of population are relatively well off in the sense that children don't have to support them. 40 years ago, 30 years ago, when you finish college, you have to support your family because you're poor, right? Now, a large number of students don't have to support the parents because the parents are relatively well off with their own income. So they can wander and take the risk. They don't have to go for a job immediately. In the IT today, I'm told that about 30 to 40% of the class goes and joins startups, and maybe 10-15% become entrepreneurs. Earlier, 20 years ago, 70% used to go overseas. Now only 10-15% are going overseas. So I think there is a shift, but it all happens based on role models in society. Who are the role models? Who are the successful people? Who are your heroes? And you want to follow a hero at an early age because you don't know. And when you see them, you want to do what they're doing. And your circumstances are very different. Look at the movie theater, right? Why do so many people come to Mumbai? Because they see the movies, a country person, is being beaten up by the Thakur. He falls in love with the Thakur's daughter. Then he runs away, comes to the city, lives on the footpath. Then, polishes shoes, then fights with something, and then become a big guy, and then goes back to the village and bashes the Thakur and marries his daughter. Now, you see this kind of movie, everybody wants to go to Mumbai. And everybody wants to live on the street and become a billionaire and do well. Why? Because these are role models. Now the role models in technology are very different. You're seeing the Fangman companies do very well, right? They're the largest companies in the world, most valuable. So everybody wants to follow their footsteps. So I think that is what the change is. And of course, the new education policy enables that too.
Well, Dr. Pai, I think we've run out of time. This really looks like a trailer for me. It's like a teaser. I wish I could get into a main show. And I'm going to really chase you for that someday. But right now, we've kind of run out of time. But this has been fantastic. Brilliant insights. I'm sure the audience has really picked up a lot from what you just said. Thank you so much for your time. And Aparna, over to you to take it from here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pai, for being here with us today. And thank you, Mr. Menon, again for coordinating, moderating our fireside chat. Thank you to both of you for kickstarting our event. Thank you, everyone. And please stay tuned for a day full of such enlightening conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.